Well, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor. And today, we've got the first video in my Read Every Book by Stephen King series. I'm reading and reviewing Carrie by Stephen King, the story of teenage Carrie White, who has the power of telekinesis, but she's been raised by her religious nut mother.
I should have killed myself when he put it in me. After the first time, before we were married, Ralph promised never again. He promised, and I believed him. But sin never dies. Sin never dies. At first, it was all right. We lived sinlessly. We slept in the same bed, but we never did it. And then that night, I saw him looking down at me that way. We got down on our knees to pray for strength. I smelled the whiskey on his breath. And then he took me with the stink of filthy roadhouse whiskey on his breath. And I liked it. With all that dirty touching of his hands all over me. I should have given you to God when you were born. But I was weak and backsliding. And now the devil has come home. We'll pray. We'll pray. We'll pray. We'll pray for the last time. We'll pray.
Well, that was strange. Oh, okay. Where were we? Yes, Carrie by Stephen King. This novel came out on April 5th, 1974, and it is the story of lonely Carrie White, the high school student who has the power of telekinesis, and she's been raised by her crazy religious mother, and that's warped her social life a bit, and all the other teenagers pick on her, the poor kid, and so she has a pretty hard time growing up and being a teenager in high school. I guess most of us can relate to that. So, I feel strange not wanting to give spoilers in this book because pretty much everybody knows how this book ends. And in fact, one of the interesting things about this book is that it takes place, first of all, in the near future, in 1979. And you're told very early on that at the prom, at the high school prom, everything goes to hell. There's been massive destruction and that Carrie is responsible for this. You learn this pretty early in the book through excerpts from, what's the book called? There's a book that, there's all these, The Shadow Exploded is a book which is purportedly about the disaster in Carrie's hometown and at the prom. So throughout the story, there are excerpts from this book and another book that is written by one of the characters of the book, Sue Snell. And so throughout the story, as the novel's going along, there'll be an excerpt for one of these books which will tell you some things that happen in the future, which tells you basically about the ending of this book, which I thought was interesting. And unfortunately, it would be great to read this fresh, unspoiled. But I am spoiled because, like pretty much everybody else in the world, I saw the film version of Carrie, and you can't get that movie out of your head once you've watched it. It's a really good movie, and it's not one of those movies that you forget. That movie, it sticks with you. And so, of course, picking up Carrie, you already know the basics of the plot. And in fact, I did read this once before. It was years and years ago, and I actually was surprised how much I'd forgotten. But, you know, the 80s were a long time ago. I was kind of young. But it was fun reading this again as an adult. I kept thinking, you know, at the same time that I'm reading this, I'm reading have read every issue of the X-Men Challenge, and there's an X-Men Marvel girl from the early days of the X-Men who has Carrie's exact powers. So that was interesting. Unfortunately for Carrie, Charles Xavier and the X-Men did not find her in time, and destruction ensued. A lot of great things about this book. I guess I won't go too much into the plot other than what I did. Carrie, who was picked on for a long time, all throughout high school, is going to the prom with Tommy, and Tommy asks Carrie to the prom because Tommy's girlfriend Sue Snell, was involved in an incident where let's just say everybody treated Carrie quite badly. And Sue Snell took part in that and then felt guilty. It's like, well, why the heck did I do that? So she got Tommy to ask Carrie to the prom, not knowing that Carrie had incredible telekinetic powers. But something bad happens at the prom to Carrie, and all hell breaks loose. And we know that's going to happen throughout the story, which is interesting. So it would be cool not to have seen the movie and not to know the details of the plot going in, just to see how effective that would have been on somebody who had no idea what the story was about. Unfortunately, of course, most of us know what this story is about. But even then, even knowing that, this is a really good book. I was surprised by how good this book is, considering it was written so early in Stephen King's career. It's his first published novel. It was not the first novel that he wrote. He actually wrote some of the Bachman books first, before this one, from what I understand. But this is his first published novel. This actually has the feel of one of those early Bachman books because it's thin, it's short, it goes straight to the point. There's no excess anything in this book. This is just, the plot just rockets forward straight away. It's cool. I have a feeling that if this was written a few years later into Stephen King's career, this book would have been 3 or 4 times as long. But that's just a guess. But as it stands, great pacing in this book. At times it does feel like it's paced pretty fast, like maybe even too fast on occasions. But still, really, really good. Really effective. The character work is really great in this book. Really fleshed out, interesting, three-dimensional characters for the most part. There are a couple of exceptions, which I'll mention in a minute. But certainly Carrie is really interesting. He nailed it in his characterization of Carrie, because she's a complex character. And Sue Snell, actually, is also a complex character. Like I said, she takes part in this cruelty to Carrie in the beginning. She becomes part of a mob and kind of gets sucked into that mob mentality. And she's not a bad person, but she's not a great person either. So she's a complex character and a very realistic and interesting character. Tommy, the jock, is also a really interesting character. He is not the dumb jock that you would expect from a high school story like this. He has more than one dimension. Tommy, interesting character. Yeah, so a lot of the characters are pretty interesting in that way, and that's impressive, especially considering how short this book is, that he was able to manage that. The same cannot be said about the villainous characters. There's a couple high school villains. They're just so villainous. They are not quite so three-dimensional as the other characters are. They're just straight awful people who do awful things and think awful thoughts and are just bad all the way through. That's not like a big complaint. I mean, it works for this story. So yeah, the villains being as villainous as they are, that's okay. If he had made this book a little bit longer, and he could have made this book a little bit longer, and it would still have worked pretty well. Then he could have done something more with those characters, probably. As it was, no, he didn't. The villains are just, you know, might as well put V's on their heads. They're just so villainous. There are some cringy sex moments in the book, which I guess you pretty much, from what I remember, you get throughout Stephen King's career. What do you do? Still, excellent, excellent book. His use of foreshadowing was really good. I did think, even though it would have been nice to go into this not knowing how things went, I did think his excerpts from future documentation about the event that happens, that are kind of sprinkled throughout the book and kind of give you a heads up of what's going to happen. I think all that works, actually. It does throughout the book. You just get this feeling of impending doom, because you don't know in the beginning of the book exactly what's going to happen, but you learn a little bit more as the story goes along, and it's just like, oh man, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. And as the further the book goes, it's looking worse and worse, how things go. And man, the payoff at the end of this book, yeah, things go to hell all right. Carrie tears it up in that town. So yeah, very positive reading experience. Great way to start the Read Every Book by Stephen King. I have no complaints to give little tiny Stephen King here, who will be joining me through every video about Stephen King. So yeah, I think little Stephen King did a great job on this book, and I look forward to the next book. Is Salem's Lot, which I kind of want to read right now, but I've got a book or two to read in between. But Salem's Lot was great, man, and it's been a while since I've read that one, and I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, Carrie by Stephen King still holds up after all this time. Highly recommend Carrie. So yeah, that was my little Stephen King video for today. Catch my next video, which will be the Sunday Penguin, where I will be talking about a very, very different book. So yeah, I will see you then. Thanks, guys.